do not know. If I look into it.
La libertad es una decisión. La libertad es ser dueño de uno mismo. La libertad es encontrar tu lugar. Es conectar, pensar, hacer, crecer, innovar para prosperar. La educación abre la puerta a la libertad. Elige ser libre. Universidad de la Libertad.
Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Qué bueno que nos acompañan en esta ocasión para escuchar a un gran amigo y un verdadero personaje en el mundo de las ideas de la libertad alrededor del mundo, en una conferencia que le pusimos un título que espero sea simpático, porque hay países ricos con gente pobre y países pobres con gente rica. Más allá de lo simpático que puede sonar o no, realmente hay grandes lecciones sobre la naturaleza de la economía, pero también nuestro papel en la sociedad y ciertamente el papel del empresario, de la mentalidad empresarial, de ese espíritu inconforme del que tanto hablamos aquí en la Universidad de la Libertad. Agradezco mucho al rector Jorge Díaz Cuervo por la confianza y la oportunidad de convocar a este par de grandes amigos. Hoy nos va a hablar en esta ocasión el doctor Mark Skousen. Algunos de ustedes fueron beneficiarios de una visita a un verdadero festival de ideas que se celebra en Estados Unidos llamado FreedomFest, que se viene celebrando desde el 2007, me parece, ya va para 18 años. El próximo año es en Las Vegas, por aquellos que se quieran apuntar a ir. Y bueno, Mark me dijo que con mucho gusto vendría aquí a la Universidad de la Libertad. Él tiene un larguísimo currículum, es Presidential Fellow y profesor distinguido en Chapman University, una universidad con un espíritu muy similar al de la Universidad de la Libertad, en Orange County, afuera de Los Ángeles, en California, y una persona enormemente reconocida dentro del mundo de las ideas de la libertad. Tiene varios libros que ha escrito sobre lógica económica, Making Modern Economics, varios otros. Él nos va a hablar un poco sobre su nuevo libro que acaba de salir, y también hay un escrito aquí que va a repartir a algunos de ustedes quienes estén interesados después de escuchar su plática. Un pequeño anuncio: va a estar aquí toda la semana aquí en la Universidad de la Libertad, va a dictar varias clases, y hay 2 fireside chats, porque también aquí nos acompaña su esposa, Joanne Skousen. If you could stand up, Joanne, please. Joanne ella dirige un festival de artes llamado el Anthem Film Festival, que se ha vuelto también un evento muy reconocido en este mundo de las ideas, donde ella se especializa en lo que ella llama storytelling. Y tiene un bonito fireside chat mañana para aquellos que estén interesados a la 1 de la tarde en la biblioteca acá arriba, sobre arte, literatura y libertad. Mark Skousen también, además de economista, además de comentarista sobre asuntos geopolíticos, especialista, es también un ser que se ha dedicado mucho al tema de las inversiones y los mercados financieros. Tiene un libro que se llama The Maxims of Wall Street, y también publica un newsletter muy importante en la materia. Y él nos va a dar un fireside chat, Investing in One Lesson, que es el jueves a la 1 de la tarde, también en la biblioteca. Así que todos están cordialmente invitados a participar en ambos fireside chats. Pues que no se diga más, le damos la bienvenida a el doctor Mark Skousen. What a privilege to have you here, Mark.
Un placer. Thank you. Well, this is a real pleasure to be here. I have been to Mexico and Mexico City. a number of times. My wife and I have had I think we had an anniversary dinner here, it seemed like, as I recall.
It felt like one, yes.
Yes, okay.
It was very nice.
So I should start off by telling you a little story about Milton Friedman. How many of you have heard of the name Milton Friedman, the economist? Well, quite a few of you. So he's probably the most famous free market economist. And I became friends with him, and in 1985, I had the opportunity to have lunch with him. And this was at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Laguna Beach, California, so it was right on the beach. And it was a beautiful day, beautiful sunny day, and I said, listen, Mr. Friedman, let's have lunch together, just the two of us. So we had lunch together for a couple of hours. Had a great time. We were talking about all kinds of things and stuff like that. And then the bill came, and I grabbed the bill and immediately said to Mr. Friedman, all my life I've heard you say there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I don't want to ever hear this again because I'm paying for yours. And quick as a bat, he said, no, no, Mark, that was not a free lunch. I had to listen to you for 2 hours. So, I'm not going to speak for 2 hours. In fact, Roberto, how long should I talk? And then we take Q&A. Less than 2 hours, and we take a Q&A and all of that sort of thing. So we'll keep going as long as my voice holds out. I have a bottled water here. And
Mark, about 40 minutes max.
40 minutes.
So that we can participate with questions.
Okay. That sounds like a good idea. I also carry in my pocket a gold coin. Anybody recognize what this coin is? 1.2 ounces of gold.
Is it centenary? It is.
It's a centenarian, or I think that's what it's called. Valued at 50 pesos. Anybody who would like to buy this from me for 50 pesos? Quite a few hands are going up. Indeed. So this in US dollars is almost $4,000 in this coin. And why do I carry it in my pocket? Well, I kind of do it to spite Donald Trump, to be honest with you. just to kind of get his goat, because this is the most beautiful coin that has ever been minted, the gold coin, the Centenario. And it's just a wonderful coin with Lady Liberty on it. And it says on the side, Libertad de Independencia. And it also has the year that I was born. And that's another reason I keep it on me at all times. So anyway, it's a delight to be here. And let's first talk about why some countries are rich and other poor. And we'll talk about countries that have gone from poverty to riches. And there are also a few countries that have gone from riches to poverty. It's gone in reverse. And why any country would do that is beyond me. But you have government officials who think they're doing the right thing and oftentimes do very much the wrong thing. And on the other hand, there are leaders, political leaders, who have got it. They know how to make a country rich. Singapore is a great example of that. Lee Kuan Yew, he was a socialist when he was elected in 1965 in Singapore. And before he decided to decide what economic policy that he should adopt, he took a 40-country tour around the world. He went to country after country to see what country worked, what country didn't, what country went from poverty to riches, what went from riches to poverty. And when he was all through, it was very clear to him that countries that are open to their economies, that adopt free market economics, and have the rule of law, that have adopted the Adam Smith model of the system of natural liberty, those countries grew the fastest. And when he said open economy, that included Adam Smith's most famous policy, free trade. So he invited, instead of saying no to foreign companies, to imperial countries and all the Marxist doctrine that you hear that's so bad about foreigners and imperialism and stuff like that, he welcomed all the foreign companies to come to Singapore and produce products, because Singapore really didn't produce anything. And today, Singapore is the most successful country in Asia. So you see, it helps to go and travel. How many have traveled outside of Mexico? Okay, every hand should go up eventually. You need to get out and see the world and find out what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so my approach to economics is to focus on what works. What is the best policy? Not who's right, but what is right. So I don't look at left and right and all that sort of thing. I don't see Karl Marx as a leftist and Smith as a rightist and Keynes in the middle. To me, it's what works. So I prefer the totem pole approach to economics, and I put the Adam Smith model, just like Lee Kuan Yew put the Adam Smith model at the top. And then Keynes is second, and Marx is low man on the totem pole. So that's my approach in my book, which is available as a textbook, The Making of Modern Economics, which, by the way, has been translated into Spanish and published by Unión Editorial. So the Adam Smith model is this. This is the basis of any country that wants to go from poverty to riches has to adopt these 5 criteria. You need pro-savings. You need to encourage your people to save. You need businesses to save and invest that money productively. You need to limit government. You don't want government doing everything. You don't want government running businesses. How many know of a government-run business that works really well? Very few. So minimize government ownership of private enterprise. You need to live within your means, a balanced budget. You need sound money. Is inflation good? Well, it's very disruptive to have to constantly change prices and costs to determine profits and so forth. You want stable pricing as much as possible. And finally, you want free trade. You want to invite the best and the brightest to come to your country. One of the reasons America has done so well is because up until recently, we invited the best and the brightest to come to America and create new businesses. And if you name the 5 biggest companies in the world in market cap, what are they? Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Starbucks, NVIDIA. Those companies are all based in the United States. There's no reason why they can't be based in Mexico. You just need to invite the best and the brightest to come. And you have many bright people coming, and they become wealthy and they become successful because they have followed the American dream or the Mexican dream or the Italian dream or what have you. The Keynesian model is just the opposite. It's pro-consumption, wants activist big government, deficit spending, easy money, and fair trade, not free trade. And when you are enveloped with free trade, there's always people who come along and say, well, what you're doing is not fair. You're undercutting my prices. Competition, that's what business is all about. Creative disruption, changing the world. I guarantee you, the major you're getting right now in college is probably not what you're going to do in real life. Now, there are exceptions, medical doctors and so forth, nurses, and they may do that for the rest of your life. But I know a lot of people who got a law degree that went into real estate, went into entrepreneurial businesses and so forth. It wasn't what they expected to do. I've changed jobs a number of times in my life, and most people have as well. Okay, the Marxist model is central planning, nationalization, free goods and services. And this is what attracts young people who don't have the money to afford all the goods and services that they see wealthy people enjoying. So there's the envy factor, and they are attracted to the Marxist socialist model. Anyway, why are some countries rich and others poor? Well, one reason may be, well, they have an abundance or they lack natural resources. Another one, size of the population. 3, access to capital investment and technology. The key factor is not natural resources. How many natural resources are in Switzerland? How many natural resources are there in Hong Kong? These are 2 of the wealthiest countries in the world. Do they have natural resources? Do they have a big population? No, but what they do have is access to capital investment and technology. Human capital and physical capital. That's the key. Number 3, not 1 and not 2. So this brings me to the Economic Freedom Index. Every student here at the Universidad de la Libertad needs to know about the Economic Freedom Index. It's put out by the Fraser Institute in Canada and also the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. By a show of hands, how many have heard of the Economic Freedom Index? Okay, so a few of hands are going up, maybe a third, maybe a half. So this was established in the late 80s, early 90s by Milton and Rose Friedman and Michael Walker from the Fraser Institute in Canada and other, Ed Follner who recently passed away from the Heritage Foundation. So they said, can we quantify economic freedom? And if you can quantify it, we can rank countries by how free they are. And then we can see if you have a free country, are you growing faster or slower? We can confirm the Adam Smith model, his system of natural liberty, which consisted of these 5 areas. So they quantified the size of government. Number 2 is very difficult, but they came up with a way of measuring the legal system and property rights. They can measure the inflation of monetary policy, business regulations, figure out some way of measuring how over-regulated or under-regulated an economy is. And of course, you can determine through tariffs and other barriers to trade to what extent is trade policy free trade or regulated trade and fair trade and so on. So Jim Gwartney was involved with this study of the Economic Freedom Index. He is a professor, the late professor at Florida State University. And he looked at, he ran through a regression analysis and found out that one of the 5 was the most important factor in economic growth. So how many think it's the size of government? How many think it's the legal system? How many think it's monetary policy? How many think it's business regulation? And how many think it's free trade? He said the answer was number 2. It was the most important factor, the legal system and the rule of law and an independent judiciary. How important is that? Okay. So what did they discover? Well, they discovered that countries that have more freedom have a higher standard of living. They quantified it. They tested the Adam Smith thesis with data and came to the conclusion that countries have the higher standard of living as measured by income, average GDP per capita. The more freedom, the more you grew, the higher standard of living. Can you see now the value of the Economic Freedom Index? And they rank every country. Guess what country is number 1 in the world? Is it Iran? Is it North Korea? Is it Venezuela? Is it Cuba? The repressed areas? Is it Mexico? Is it the United States? Is it Singapore? And the answer is Singapore. It used to be Hong Kong for many years until the Chinese communists started coming into the country a couple of years ago and started suppressing that country, sadly. Okay. Here's an interesting chart about going from poverty to riches, because under Mao Zedong, there was no economic growth. No economic growth. And then, finally, you had a new group of Chinese that came in and look at the tremendous economic growth. And they've actually increased their economic freedom, not their political freedom. Now, this is an index of economic freedom, okay? Not political freedom. Singapore is number one in economic freedom, but not political freedom. You don't even vote in Singapore in many cases. It is more of a what we'd call a benevolent dictator, right? Lee Kuan Yew and his followers. But China decided to liberate its economy. Instead of being 80% state government, 20% free market, it's flipped. It's now 80% free market and 20% state capitalism. So here's a great story here. So here's Hong Kong, which is a rock. How many have been to Hong Kong? Hong Kong is worth visiting. Well, it used to be worth visiting. I don't know about now. But I've spent many years in Hong Kong, or many trips to Hong Kong, one of my favorite places to go in Asia. So there they are in the red, Hong Kong, way down there, 1960, way down there. Now at the top. I mean, who would have ever thought in 1960 a rock that actually imports most of their food and water is in that kind of situation? Why? Because Hong Kong adopted the Adam Smith model better than anybody else under British control. And it made a big difference. When was the last time the Hong Kong government changed their tax policy? Anybody want to guess? I mean, we change in the United States our tax policy every couple of years. You get a new president, you get a new tax law. Hong Kong changed their tax policy to a flat tax policy in 1960. And it's virtually, I mean, they change a few little things here and there. But can business really develop when they know what the tax and estate legislation is year after year? You bet. So tax planning was very easy but they're not a democracy. That's one of the drawbacks to a democracy. You can't do that. So anyway, Hong Kong, it's quite a story. Ireland decided right around here to change their tax policy so that they would attract foreign corporations. Come to Ireland, register with us, and your tax rate will be 12%, the lowest rate in all of Europe, lower than the United States and Canada. So even Apple went and registered their international organization in Ireland and minimized their tax, and look what happened. What kind of a lesson is this to anyone who's in office? The importance of Ireland. Even in Africa, Botswana decided to adopt the Adam Smith model here, and especially the rule of law, which is lacking in most African countries, and look at the difference it made. These are fantastic success stories of people going from poverty to riches. The United States, for many years, saw economic freedom rising, and our economy exploded with it. And it's continuing economically to grow, but we're growing at a slower rate. The United States used to grow at 3 to 4% a year, sometimes more, sometimes less. Now we're down to 1 to 2% every year. And one of the reasons is because our economic freedom index has been declining. And of course, do you know where it topped out? 9/11. That started the war in Iraq, the Patriot Act, all kinds of restrictions and regulations that affected government. And then on top of it, the financial crisis of 2008. Look what happened when that happened. We lost a lot of our economic freedoms and a lot of regulations that were imposed. Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and that sort of thing. Trump, of course, under Donald Trump, maybe this will go up, maybe it won't, but it depends on the net balance between on the deregulations and the lower taxes on the one hand, and then imposing these tariffs and the trade war, and the xenophobic attitude toward foreigners that Trump seems to have. All right, so that's economic freedom index. Now here's an interesting case. North Korea versus South Korea. Growing virtually the same up until the early 1990s, and then we saw suppression in North Korea having an effect that was pretty dramatic. And Roberto, you'll like the picture here. I do show at night, the dark area of North Korea between China and South Korea. And it's quite a stark contrast, isn't it, between the two countries. And this is the problem with communism in North Korea. You have to remember that it's a religion. And you don't give up your religion very much, do you? And Marxism is a religion to these people. And they say, we're going to change human nature if it takes a generation or another generation or 3 generations. We are not giving up our power. Now, of course, China was smart enough to realize that Marxism does not work, and you need to adopt socialism with Chinese characteristics. And what are those Chinese characteristics? The Adam Smith model. Now, it's dangerous for China to do this because they're creating billionaires. And with money comes what? Power. If you have a lot of money, you're going to want to have power. May I use the example of Elon Musk as a perfect example of the wealthiest man in the world? Does he care about politics? Well, he does now. And it's, 2 dogs hunting, it's like 2 dogs hunting 1 hare. That's the problem. Elon Musk, I thought he'd learned his lesson and went back to business, but now he wants to start a third party. So it's kind of unfortunate. If you're in business, stay in business and stay out of politics as much as you can. That's the key to success. Okay, so there's an example of a country that was doing really well, but went from wealth down to poverty, and then South Korea, which I've been to many times. South Korea is a marvel to see the distinct difference between South Korea and North Korea. So that's what you want to achieve as far as success is concerned. Now, let's talk about the Middle East situation. Why is it that there is so much sympathy now for the Palestinians and against Israel? Well, I'm going to put my economics hat on, which is, I always wear a hat when I teach my course because students don't remember my name. You probably don't remember my name, but you remember the professor with the hat. That's right, the professor with the hat. And I'm going to put my economics hat on to discuss the Middle East situation. So what was Israel like in 1948 when it became an independent country and it was just that little separate part of the Middle East was made a country? They were the underdog, weren't they? They were poverty-stricken, and they didn't think they could win a war against the Arabs during that time period. But they ended up winning a number of wars, and finally when they sloughed off socialism, because I guarantee you if you study the leaders, the political leaders, they were all socialists when they first came to power. And then in the 80s, they caught on to Milton Friedman, who was also Jewish, and they realized, hey, maybe we should adopt free market capitalism, which they have. And as a result, I'm just showing you the unemployment rate, but the economy has gone from third world to first world. How many have been to Israel? Let me tell you, when you walk across Palestine into Israel, you're going from third world to first world. And there's a lot of envy about that. But there's a lot of Arabs who said, wow, that's fantastic. I'm going to live in Israel. There are a lot of Arabs who live, and Palestinians who live in Israel and love it. Okay, so the unemployment rate dropping in Israel, their economy going from third world to first world, and then Palestinian economy, unemployment rising, stagnating economy, recession, third world country. So who is sympathetic with a first world country? No, you are in favor of the underdog. And who is the underdog today? Not Israel. Israel is in power, militarily, politically, economically, but not the Palestinians. They're struggling because they haven't caught on to the Adam Smith model. Many of the Arab states have, and they've actually developed a closer friendship with Israel than with the Palestinians. So there's some interesting, that's my perspective. There's the reason why a lot of people on campuses and so on are in favor of Palestinians, because they're the underdog. That's my thesis. Now, Roberto, why don't you come up and do a little story. This is kind of a fun one about Nogales and the two countries, America and Mexico, United States and Mexico.
A little context, though.
Please, come on up. Do you have a microphone? Oh, we're going to get you one. Here we go.
Bueno, lo vamos a hacer en Spanglish. Entonces, de todo lo que nos ha estado explicando el doctor Skousen, hay dos autores muy famosos que ganaron el premio Nobel el año pasado, Darren Acemoglu y James Robinson, que tienen un gran libro que se llama Why Nations Fail, ¿por qué las naciones fracasan? Pero que realmente es sobre el mismo tema de por qué hay países ricos con gente pobre y por qué hay países pobres con gente rica. Una síntesis de esto es que al final del día los autores lo que dicen es que la diferencia entre progreso y pobreza de las naciones no reside en su geografía, no reside en su demografía. Esos son elementos que pueden incidir, pero no es lo fundamental. No reside en si tiene o no abundancia en recursos naturales. Corea del Sur y Corea del Norte son buenos ejemplos de eso. Corea del Sur, pues básicamente tiene tres cosas: tiene agua, tierra y sudcoreanos, y un vecino al norte, pues un tanto más hostil que el nuestro. Bueno, quién sabe estos días. Entonces, el primer ejemplo, curiosamente, que utilizan los autores, el primerísimo ejemplo que utilizan es el caso de Nogales, Sonora y Nogales, Arizona. Y ellos dicen, Nogales, Arizona tiene un producto por habitante mucho más alto que Nogales, Sonora, sistema de salud muy superior, o sea, todo está a todo dar en Nogales, Arizona. Y en Nogales, Sonora, pues hay crimen, hay corrupción, hay atraso, lo que decía Mark, first world versus third world. Sin embargo, si ustedes hoy viajan a Nogales, verán que es exactamente al revés, que la ciudad que ha explotado con comercio, con manufactura, con inversión, con desarrollo y una explosión demográfica sin precedentes, casi 400,000 habitantes, es Nogales, Sonora. Y Nogales, Arizona, tiene 19,000 habitantes, de los cuales la mitad son sonorenses que viven en Arizona y cruzan la frontera. Entonces, la gran pregunta es, ¿dónde se equivocaron Acemoglu y Robinson? Porque es una ciudad que está split in two, dividida en dos, por simplemente ni siquiera una muralla, es como una rejota, ¿sí? Pero realmente son dos lados de la misma ciudad, y así se ven en Nogales, se ven completamente integrados. Entonces, ¿qué fue lo que pasó ahí? What is it that happened there? So I'll leave it to you to explain what is it that happened.
Well, I would tell me about East. I would use the example of Eastern Berlin and Western Berlin, how they had the wall.
Well, that's the way that,
and that's the way we normally say the West did so much better than the East. But from what you've explained, the catch-up, the Nogales in Mexico has caught up with the Nogales in Arizona. Is that what you're...
It's more than that. No tan solo it's caught up. Es decir, lo que pasó con Nogales, Sonora, ¿qué sucedió en 1994, que fue el factor determinante de esto? El TLC. Fue la firma del Tratado de Libre Comercio. Algunos amigos de casa, Luis Rubio, Luis de la Calle, Mariana Campos, Juan Pardinas, que estuvo aquí el otro día, ¿se acuerdan en el evento que tuvimos con el Aspen Institute? Explicaban que la gran ventaja del Tratado de Libre Comercio, más allá de que liberalizó el comercio, más allá de que permitió más inversión, es que de alguna forma fue una especie de camisa de fuerza en donde importó la credibilidad de instituciones que se aplican a nivel regional. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Que no están sujetas a cambios de acuerdo a supremas cortes democráticas y ya no independientes, los caprichos de algún gobernante. No son los cambios, por ejemplo, que hemos visto en la Constitución de México, que bueno, algunos de ustedes aquí me dirán, pero creo que son 600 cambios en un poco más de 100 años, ¿no? La de Estados Unidos ha tenido, how many amendments in the U.S. Constitution in 250 years?
27.
27, ¿no? Entonces, hay una inestabilidad jurídica, y recuerden lo que decía Mark, de la importancia de la libertad económica. Sí, todas las 5 áreas son, pero la más importante de todas es el Estado de Derecho, la estabilidad en el rule of law y el sistema legal. Entonces, Nogales, Sonora, se benefició enormemente de este blindaje institucional que le llevó el Tratado de Libre Comercio, de tal suerte que hubo una gran cantidad de inversión, no tan solo en Nogales, en todo lo que es el estado de Sonora, así como también pues el crecimiento que se ha observado en estas ciudades fronterizas ha sido exponencial. El mismo fenómeno no se observa en Tijuana y en San Diego, pero sí se llega a observar en Laredo y Nuevo Laredo, que es el punto de interacción económica más dinámico y de mayor actividad en todo el mundo. Algo similar está empezando a suceder en Matamoros y Brownsville. Y así me parece que es un estudio fascinante lo que pasa en la frontera, por el hecho de que tenemos ya apertura en el comercio exterior y también un régimen de inversión que está gobernado por reglas del juego que no son meramente nacionales, sino que son regionales, mucho más difíciles de cambiar. Como lo explica Luis Rubio, es una especie de camisa de fuerza de la cual no nos podemos escapar, pero que de ahí que se han hecho inversiones gigantescas, sobre todo en manufactura, y ha logrado una enorme diversificación. Entonces, el caso de Nogales, Sonora y Nogales, Arizona, comprueba la tesis de Acemoglu y Robinson de que se necesita mayor innovación, Estado de Derecho, libre comercio, estabilidad monetaria, pero al revés, porque es un caso que dice, miren, esta ciudad que importó estas instituciones logró salir mucho más adelante. ¿Es mayor el PIB per cápita, en el producto per cápita, el nivel de vida en Nogales, Arizona? Sí, pero fue un crecimiento, digamos, que creció de aquí a acá, mientras que Nogales, Sonora creció de aquí hasta acá. Así que, bueno, ese es el caso. Tengo un artículo extraordinario, por cierto, que les puedo compartir con mucho gusto.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, thank you. Thank you, please. Applause for Roberto Salin. I actually think there's what we call the coast theorem is at work here. When you don't have the full rule of law like you want in Mexico, for example, the fact that you're creating a legitimate business relationship across the borders forces you to establish your own rules of law, which are extremely important. So that's the Coase theorem, named after Ronald Coase. Okay, we're running short on time, so I'll just go over a few other things. Latin America, this is really an incredible chart from Jose Piñera from Chile. Of course, he's a little bit prejudiced, but as you can see, Chile dominates since adopting in the early 80s the Chicago boys, free market, Adam Smith model, and look how Chile excelled faster than all the other countries in Latin America, including Mexico, which is right here in the middle. And then, of course, we have the example of Venezuela collapsing because of their total rejection of the Adam Smith model and adopting the militant religious faith of Marxism. We're going to teach everyone this important lesson, and there's lots of examples of this kind of thing going on. Cuba, the economic crisis. Cuba is a classic example of adopting Marxist ideology, and they're holding on to it past the death of Castro, and now with the new presidency, they've opened up a little bit, but not enough to avoid a repressed ranking of 175 out of 180 countries that are covered. They're near the bottom. I mean, what a tragedy. Cuba is such a beautiful country. It's just tragic to see this sort of thing going on. But it is useful to you to have countries having different experiences. You learn from experience, not so much from theory, but from experience. And then, of course, the hope is with Javier Milei making dramatic changes, eliminating the budget deficit, reducing government spending by 30%, more money coming back into Argentina, inviting foreign investment back rather than import substitution laws. He has not dollarized, which he promised to do, which I think overall would be beneficial. The problem with dollarization is that if you don't have enough pesos, you have to do the exchange rate at a very high rate. Ecuador did this, and it hurt a lot of people who could not afford to buy dollars when they dollarized. But they still were able to get through it. So there's still a lot of uncertainty whether Milei will be able to replace the Peronistas' doctrines, which have been so destructive, the nationalization of industries and progressive taxation and limits on foreign investment and exchange controls and all that sort of thing. Well, I'm going to pass off a couple of things that we're going to talk about in our lecture about what's better than democratic socialism, democratic capitalism. This is just a list of some of the popular Keynesian economic policies which tend to slow economic growth over time. As you can see, there's a long list of things where government intervenes and really hurts the economy. So I wanted to just mention some of these things. I think the PowerPoint will be available to all our students. I did want to mention one thing that I do have as a handout. I don't think I have enough for everyone, but I want you to be aware that as you walk out, I think we have them, well, right there. So I have copies of a pamphlet I wrote called The Economics of Life Made Simple. It was the cover story of Skeptic magazine a year or so ago, and it's been a very popular reprint. I've printed up over 2,000 of these, and particularly people who are not economists, who are not majoring in economics, lawyers, doctors, accountants. I had an accountant come up to me and say, "Mark, I've always tried to understand economics, so I read the book Economics for Dummies, and I still couldn't understand economics until I read your pamphlet." And a lawyer came up to me and said, Mark, this is the best brief I have ever read in economics. So that just gives you an idea of how this has been a popular booklet or little pamphlets, 15 pages long. For those of you who don't read, I do have graphs, charts to look at. I tell my students, I said, students, I know you don't read anymore, but you do look. And they nod in agreement. So anyway, I have that available, and we have a few more copies that if you attend any of my other lectures, if we run out, you can pick that one up. Okay, so I'm going to end with a couple of quotes from Adam Smith. I am giving a talk. My last lecture here will be called The Genius of Adam Smith, where I'll go into details on why he has developed the best model. And Adam Smith said, little else is required to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence, from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice. And I would add sound money to that. That's the other category. So in Mexico, do you have easy taxes? Okay, how about peace? Are you at war with anybody other than the United States? Okay, how about a tolerable administration of justice? Okay, so it looks like you need to work on that last one. How about sound money? Well, you've gone through a period of rapid inflation, but it sounds like you've done a better job of controlling that. So that's the Adam Smith model, and your country will grow or engage in or fall back depending on how well you live up to the Adam Smith model. Okay, so I just wanted to mention, Roberto mentioned my FreedomFest conference, which is also the Anthem Film Festival that my wife runs, and that's going to be in Las Vegas next July. We had 6 students come from Universidad de la Libertad, and I understand they really had a good time. Any of those students here? Okay, 1, 2, there are several here. So ask them how they liked it, and if you would like to join us, we understand Donald Trump is going to personally welcome every Mexican who comes in to see the Freedom Fest conference. Okay, well, thank you very much, and let's open it up to questions. Or should I ask you a question? There's a question right here, yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, I would like to get your take on why, in a certain way, why are Keynesian economics so attractive for politicians? Your take on that.
Yes.
You give us your insight.
So the question is, why is Keynesian economics so attractive to politicians? So you have to remember that there is a revolution that has occurred in economics since John Maynard Keynes wrote his book, The General Theory, in 1936. Because prior to that, the classical economists said, hey, if you're in a recession, you're in a depression, everybody has to tighten their belt. Everybody. Consumers, business people, and that makes perfect sense. If a recession or depression is happening, your job is threatened. You may be laid off. You may be fired. You don't know how long you're going to be unemployed. So you're going to hold back and you're going to not spend money. The business people, same thing. They're not going to invest. They're not going to hire more people if they know a recession is coming. So it makes perfect sense that consumers and business cut back during a recession. In fact, I recommend it, because if you want to survive a recession, you better have retained earnings. You better have cash. You better have a job that you can depend on. So, but government is an independent entity. They have the ability to print their own money. They have the ability with AAA rating to loan out money as much as they want. So the Keynesian revolution was, instead of pulling in and cutting back, which is what government did in the past, like consumers and business, they could do just the opposite. They can continue to expand. They can engage in public works. They can borrow money indefinitely. They can print their own money. So that was Keynes's optimistic message. We don't have to go through this recession forever. We can do a counter-cyclical federal deficit, and it won't hurt us. Interest rates are not likely to rise because we're in a recession. So that was the Keynesian revolution. And it's very appealing to know that your constituents will get free money from the government that they can go out and spend. What did the Biden administration do during the COVID recession? Maybe the president in Mexico did the same thing. They gave $1,200 to every American, or practically, and so they would continue to go out and spend. That's very popular. You have to remember also public choice economics. Public choice economics that James Buchanan came up with. He wrote a book called Democracy in Deficit. Democracy in Deficit. And the subtitle was the legacy of Keynesian economics. And what is that legacy? The legacy is, during a recession, don't raise taxes. That would be bad because people will have less money to spend. So you cut taxes during recession. Anybody against that? No, you're in favor of that. And then spend money. Go to your local constituents and say, okay, build a dam, build new buildings, public buildings, put people to work in public parks and stuff. Will that stimulate the economy? Of course it will. So you can see why the result is deficit spending that lasts indefinitely, which is one of the legacies of Keynesian economics, and low taxes and easy money. All of that's very popular. So that's the reason why Keynesian economics is permanently popular among people. The key for those of us who favor responsible fiscal policy is that when you reach full employment, you've got to impose the budget restraint, and you have to control the fiscal policy. That's the time to do it, when you're at full employment. And that's been the problem child with a lot of free market economists, is they don't emphasize that enough, and so we continue to run these huge deficits even though we're at full employment. Other questions? Roberto has a question.
Well, given everything you've talked about sound money, we talk here at Universidad de la Libertad a great deal about Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So what's your take on Bitcoin? Is it a currency? Is it not a currency? Does it have a potential? Why is there such enthusiasm on institutions like Universidad de la Libertad for decentralized technologies like Bitcoin?
Okay, so Bitcoin is, maybe step back a little bit to talk about Ludwig von Mises, who spoke here in the 40s, apparently, gave a series of lectures, as we were talking about. Ludwig von Mises had what is known as the regression theorem. And he said, why is it that paper money, and these are dollars that I'm holding in my pocket, and you may have pesos in your pocket, why is it that this has value? Anybody have an answer for this? Just paper money. Why is a $5 bill worth $5 when it only costs 10 cents to print? There's no relationship between paper money and its cost of production. And that's not true in any other industry except collectibles. Okay? If the cost goes up, you're probably going to have to raise the price. There's some connection, isn't there, between price and cost? But with money, there's no connection. And Mises answered that question. He said it's the regression theorem, because he said this used to be backed by this, gold. And even this says 50 pesos on it. So back in the day, you should be able to take 50 pesos into the Bank of Mexico and receive one of these. And then they disconnected the two. But they disconnected the two so that you were all fooled. You were all fooled into thinking paper money still has value. So, but it's not backed by anything, is it? Except for the power to tax and so forth. So the question is, Bitcoin, what's backing Bitcoin? Backing Bitcoin, any backing of Bitcoin? Does it take energy? Is there a cost of producing Bitcoin? Yes, there is. Mining Bitcoin is rather expensive, and especially since the halving event. And since the halving event, it now takes more energy to produce a Bitcoin. So there is some correlation between cost and the price of the Bitcoin. The other difference is that, like gold, are there limitations on how much gold is produced? You know that the total amount of monetary gold that is produced in the world increases only 1% to 2% a year. Did you know that? It is hard money, let me tell you. It's not like petroleum. It's not like wheat. It's not like iron ore. Gold has a severe limit, and so does silver. But silver is used more of an industrial metal, so it's more volatile. But looking at gold, you have relative stability. Bitcoin has a severe limitation of 21 million Bitcoin, and 5 million of it has been lost and is never going to be recovered. And with the halving event, it's more costly to produce the Bitcoin. So to the extent that you all are foolish enough to accept Bitcoin and you think it has value, it's going to continue to have value. And it may go up to, well, I'm predicting 200,000 by the end of the year. We'll see if that prediction comes true. I think Bitcoin has legitimacy. It also has privacy benefits that we've talked about. And as Roberto was saying, one of his friends holds Bitcoin because the government can't take away his Bitcoin. But they could put a gun to your head and say, give us your passport or your password for Bitcoin. So you never know. Government would be very creative to steal your Bitcoin. So it's very speculative. You can lose half your value. And what if another coin, cryptocurrency, comes along that offers a better service? That's another risk that you have with Bitcoin. So I have some mixed feelings about it overall, but in my newsletter, Forecasts and Strategies, we're up 41% this year. I'll take it. Investing in I actually invest in an ETF that invests in Bitcoin and also cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. So yeah, I think it's worth following, and we've had big debates. We recommended Bitcoin in 2014, I think it was the first time that we talked about it. So we like to think we're ahead, and we've been talking about AI for a number of years. So we think FreedomFest is a great source of new information and so forth. And we've had big debates on Bitcoin as well. But all the people who voted against Bitcoin have seen Bitcoin go up in value after each debate. So I tend to be more pro than anti. It's kind of a long answer to your question, but it's a complex issue. I think the blockchain itself, the blockchain technology, has even greater potential with title insurance, financial transactions, and so forth. So I think the blockchain is very legitimate, and that's going to be around even if Bitcoin is not. Yes?
Professor Skousen, thank you for your talk. I wanted to ask about your thoughts on the theory of the curse of natural resources. Do you believe that countries with more resources have less incentives towards growth?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because I kind of passed over Venezuela, and I should spend a little more time with there because that's the classic example of the curse of natural resources. It becomes easy money. Your country, your state has this huge value, and I mean, Spain and Portugal were the first examples with the gold and silver, right? And those countries stagnated because of it. So there's definitely something to say about the curse of the natural resource. And Venezuela is probably the best example that I can think of because they found all this oil, then the government said, we better start taxing this and we can grow just like we can become billionaires as well. And so they immediately went to 50% profit in the 40s with Gomez, and then I think Pérez Jiménez and Caldera and a lot of the other Venezuelan presidents said, well, that's not enough, we want more, and they kept increasing the profit margins. And finally they said under Chavez, well, let's just nationalize the whole thing. Of course, they didn't have refineries, and then they had to actually run the oil companies, and they ran them into the ground in Maracaibo and places like that. And then, of course, they were Marxists as well. And you put that two together and a total destruction. So that's probably the worst example that we can think of historically of Venezuela. Because Venezuela, I don't know how many of you know this, but Venezuela has more oil in the ground than Saudi Arabia. It has more oil reserves than any other country in the world. And they import their gasoline. So, I mean, if I was a Venezuelan, I would be ashamed of my country, of what they've done. And 5 million Venezuelans have left to prove they've had it with this regime. And yet they're still in power. And you know why they're still in power? Because they learned from Pinochet in Chile, you better control the military if you want to stay in power. And Chavez, being a military man, he learned that lesson. So the other one example that's contrary to that is, of course, the Arab states. And they have created a sovereign fund, and they have looked at history and said to themselves, oh, the curse of the natural resources, we better learn from history, or we're condemned to repeat it, as Santayana said. And so they have this huge sovereign fund, and I've actually been invited to give a keynote address at a major Saudi Arabian conference. I'm looking forward to that. I've been to 82 countries, and Saudi Arabia is not one of them, so I'm looking forward to that. But look what those countries have done, the UEA and all these other Arab states. They're doing very well. And Norway's another example. Norway has a sovereign fund, biggest in the world, Norway. And they know how to take care of the natural resource event, although Norway is now trying to be woke, and they're against fossil fuels. You really wonder about what they're thinking. So it's a mixed story there, that if you learn from the natural resource problem, but, you know, Switzerland, Hong Kong demonstrate very clearly you don't need natural resources to be successful. Yeah, we have a question back here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Skousen. I want to thank you for your amazing talk. And I wanted to ask you do you think that Bitcoin might become the new gold, might create a new standard to stop government expansive monetary policies? Does it have a chance to change it?
You say Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right now all the rage is the stable coin. And the stable coin is not, it's government trying to take advantage of this new technology. The stable coin is linked to currencies. and currencies depreciate in value. There is no protection from inflation from stable coins. So the US just passed the Genius Act. Now, if it's a stable coin that is linked to gold, and then it wouldn't be stable, but at least it would be more stable than Bitcoin. Or they could link the stable coin to TIPS, for example, the Treasury Insured Protection Securities. That's linked to the CPI, Consumer Price Index. Then you have a real stable currency, because a stable coin, because it's linked to an inflation, built-in inflation protection. So I would recommend a stable coin at a minimum linked to Treasury securities that's linked to the interest rate or to the inflation rate. That would be a smart move. The second one is to issue stable coins in gold, a gold cryptocurrency. That would be my second choice, because gold is actually provided, it's been more stable than it has been in the past. So gold, I think, is a way to go. But Bitcoin itself, government adopting it, yes, but they need to make it legal tender. That's the key. Why do I say that? Because right now, if you use Bitcoin, and I notice there's a machine here that allows you to pay in Bitcoin. Anybody use that? Do you notice that you have it's an ATM machine or something with Bitcoin? Well, why is it that Bitcoin is not being used much as a currency, actual transaction? Well, it's because every time you use it, theoretically, it's a taxable event. You're supposed to pay tax on that. I mean, how many people are going to do that? So that's why Bitcoin is not used very much for a currency. But if they made it legal tender so that you bought and sold Bitcoin and you didn't have to pay any tax on it, then it could legitimately become a new currency. That's the key, though. It has to be made a legal tender, and that's why I think they're afraid of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. What do you think about commercial warfare as an international policy, as Trump is doing right now?
The trade war? Or the
warfare, using a commercial relations as a warfare.
Oh, I see. Yeah. First of all, I think Trump has discovered a new, easy way to reduce the deficit through tariffs. And he gets up and extols the fact that they've balanced the budget for the first time last month because of this dramatic increase in tariffs. So he sees that, because tariff rates were extremely low, about 2% in the United States for automobiles and so forth. We're not free trade, but we're really close to that. We were. And now he's going up to 10, 15, 20%, 30%, and so forth. And he thinks it's a free lunch. And of course, as Milton Friedman says, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The supply chain is being disrupted. It's xenophobic. He's definitely hates foreigners, even though he married one. It's pretty clear to me that it's not just a negotiation technique. And I think it's very disruptive. I'm very much opposed to it. Here's my, having studied economics and international trade theory, countries that trade together stay together. And you impose these kind of restrictions, they're going to respond generally in a very negative way. Take Vietnam as an example. Vietnam is one of those, we should have talked about it, but Vietnam is one that went from poverty, and they adopted the Chinese model, and so they adopted capitalism like the Chinese, and they're running with it, and they're very successful with it. I've been to Vietnam. It's really a remarkable story. So Trump imposed a 46% tariff on Vietnam, an ally now, an economic ally. And in response, Vietnam said, well, okay, let's go to zero. Let's do quid pro quo, zero rates both sides if you really want to negotiate a deal that's positive for both of us. Trump rejected it. So that's a proof to me that he's not a free trader, that he's ultimately a protectionist. And we haven't seen all this play out, but you got 100 countries coming to America and trying to do a deal. Do you know how long a trade deal takes? Do you know how long NAFTA took? Years to put this thing together. He has just totally disrupted the system, and Wall Street has actually reached the point of just kind of giving up and calling him Taco President, you know. Here's my thinking. If you really want to promote your country, why not promote exports? Promote exports, because if you increase exports, that will increase imports automatically. You increase trade from both countries. It's called the Lerner theorem. If you want to study this in economics, look it up, the Lerner theorem. You increase imports, you will increase exports. So that's another policy. Don't cut exports, increase imports, because that gives us more money to buy more products abroad and to promote our own products abroad. If you increase imports, you increase exports. If you increase exports, you increase imports. Did you follow this? That's the Lerner theorem, and it's been proven over and over again. And as Roberto says, a trade deficit is a red herring and should be completely ignored. And unfortunately, Trump has jumped on this. He must have fallen asleep in the Wharton School, because I talked to Jeremy Siegel, who's the Wizard of Wharton. He teaches economics to everybody. And Trump must have been asleep in that class, because for him to say that America's been ripped off, we've been ripped off by you foreigners. Well, walk into a Target, walk into a Walmart, and tell me if we've been ripped off by you foreigners producing cheap and good quality products. I mean, it's just crazy. The guy is totally out of whack, except it's a negotiating skill, right? Negotiating skill. Well, we'll see about that. I don't know if I answered your question, but okay, maybe one more?
Yes.
Yes.
What do you think, or how would Adam Smith view Mexican economy today instead of all this informal sector, large internal sector, and all the government intervention that we have in Mexico right now?
You know, I hate to beg off of that kind of question, because I haven't really, I'm just not an expert on Mexican policy. I do know that they're not ranked very well in the Economic Freedom Index. And I think you already, Roberto, talked about the rule of law and do you have an independent judiciary is the issue. I mean, are they, the United States is a good example where we have independent judiciaries telling Donald Trump you're wrong, and we're rejecting some of your tariffs and stuff like that. Do you have, and my understanding is that Mexico just passed a law, correct me if I'm wrong, that all judges will now be democratically elected. And that sounds really good, except it could be ending up in severe corruption, which is, I understand, been a problem in Mexico. But I would think Roberto and other experts, you're better experts than I am on that sort of thing. And here's the other question. So how's the Mexican fund? How's the stock market done? How's the Bolsa done in Mexico? It's probably underperformed, I suspect, especially to the US market. So that suggests that a lot of reform needs, and I don't know what those reforms are, but those are indicators that, that things could be done better here in Mexico. Okay, well, thank you all very much.
We have one more question.
Wait a minute. Uno más.
Can I ask a question? Thank you for your wonderful speech. And I hear that USA started to investment in Bitcoins through the ETFs. And if we take the case of Salvador, they made Bitcoin official currency right now with the new president.
In El Salvador, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about the countries also starting to invest in Bitcoin and making it as an economy strategy? What do you think about this? Thank you.
Yeah, so Bitcoin is being accepted more and more as an asset. And maybe some of the sovereign debt or sovereign funds will start investing in Bitcoin. Perhaps they have. I wouldn't be surprised. And even Donald Trump has suggested the possibility of creating a crypto sovereign fund in crypto. But he hasn't done it yet. Many people in the private equity business were very much anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin, Warren Buffett being the classic example. So there's no question that with President Trump being elected and being the Bitcoin president, as he calls it, but I do think you have to be very careful there in the corruption problem, because his two sons are totally invested in Bitcoin, and so they're profiting from the president. I don't like that. I don't think that's right. But there is a movement in direction. But the real issue is legal tender status. Now, yes, El Salvador has done it, but that's a tiny country. It's a drop in the bucket. You have another question on Bitcoin?
Yes, I have one question, not about Bitcoin, but coming back to Mexico, you know, like in our context, the corruption, impunity, and the privilege is like only in one section of our population. So I want to ask, like, do you believe like a free market can function efficiently and generate real prosperity for the majority, like when we have this unequal system?
I think I've given, I mean, if you look at, let's take the Chinese for an example. Chinese were earning $1 a day. Poverty was everywhere. The first time my wife and I went to China, we saw they had not adopted technology in farming. They still had the plow and so forth. And when they were building buildings, they had sticks to put up the buildings. And everybody was riding bicycles. They weren't even riding motorcycles. We come back 20 years later, there are tractors, okay? There are, what do they call it? To build the skyscrapers, but they don't use, they had the cranes, okay? And now they drive cars. There are motorcycles, but it's not like, it's almost all cars now. So that's an indication that through education and through foreign markets, inviting foreign capital. I mean, Mexico should not have a nationalized oil industry. That's a mistake. They need to privatize it. And they could make a ton of money. The government could take a ton of money by privatizing that. And let foreigners buy property on the coast. I mean, you know, you're doing just what Donald Trump does, is alienating foreigners. And you have to, I just finished a book by Ben Franklin, about Ben Franklin. And I call him the world's most versatile genius. And what was his attitude? His attitude was freedom for everybody, and not just for Americans, and not just for the British, and not just for the Mexicans, but for everybody, so that the rule of law and the rights of man are so universal that no matter what country he sat on or he landed on, he would say, "This is my country." And not because he took it over either, you know? So there's a lot to be said for freedom. Make freedom great again. Don't make America great again. Make freedom great again is what I say. And the more freedom you have, I mean, Every government that comes into Mexico every 6 years is coming up with new regulations and new rules. There was an Ecuadorian, I think he's from Ecuador or Peru or something. He said, you know, today everything is either, more and more, everything is either being mandated or prohibited. Mandated or prohibited. So it's kind of like in Star Wars with that the walls coming in on both sides. And eventually it destroys your freedom and your lives if you don't have that freedom. We need to widen those out, broaden those out, fewer regulations, deregulate the economy, lower taxes so that you choose what you want to use with that money, and government has to shrink as a result of that. That's a tall order, but countries have done it, and those countries that have done it, they're in the top. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, Pablo. Muchas gracias a todos ustedes por acompañarnos esta tarde para escuchar al doctor Mark Skousen. Repito que es un verdadero privilegio tener aquí en nuestra casa, la Universidad de la Libertad, a un personaje tan conocido y reconocido en el mundo de las ideas de la libertad como Mark, un gran amigo. Y bueno, ya nos invitó a Las Vegas el año entrante, así que pues ahí tenemos que ponernos las pilas y estar puestos. Va a estar aquí el día de mañana y el jueves prácticamente todo el día, va a estar dando varias clases, pero va a participar mañana su esposa Joan, les repito, a la 1 de la tarde, aquí en la biblioteca, en un fireside chat sobre arte, literatura y libertad. Y también a la 1 de la tarde del jueves, Mark va a estar dando un fireside chat sobre Investing in One Lesson. Va a ser más inversión, menos política económica y economía, que es otro lado y repito, otra faceta de la cual es muy conocido, tanto así que lo invitaron a Arabia Saudita, ahí con el gran experimento del Fondo Soberano.
I'll be talking about my newsletter and my newsletter.
Él me pagó para que yo le hiciera ese comercial. Así que,
3 times better than the stock market this year. Not bad.
Muy bien, not bad at all, not bad at all. Probablemente no invirtió en pesos, pero bueno, es otro tema. Y recuerden, aquí tenemos los panfletos. Paoli nos va a hacer el favor aquí para los que quisieran. Yo me voy a quedar con este ya de una vez. The Economics of Life Made Simple. Nuevamente, muchas gracias. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Nos vemos la próxima. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.